So I wanted to make a video about my favourite tarot books, my personal favourite tarot books. But I have learned about myself during my time away from YouTube that I need to film when I'm in the mood to film. And sometimes that means filming at 9 o'clock at night, which means if I sit in front of my bookcase where I normally sit, you can't fucking see me because the lighting in my front room is terrible. So I'm going to film here in my old space that some of you who've been with me since the beginning will recognise. And I'm just going to film it now because I'm in the mood to talk about it now. And I might not be in the mood to talk about it tomorrow in the daylight. So it is what it is, right? There are 5. That was not a deliberate choice. I didn't go out and think... I didn't start with my top 5 favourite tarot books as a title. It just so happens that I went through the books that I own, that I've already read, and picked out the ones that are my favourites. And it just so happened there were 5 of them. So there's that. And they are not in, they're not in order of how much I like them. They're in order of when I read them, because that's just how I've laid them out. Anyway. Enough waffly rambling, let's get to the point. So the first book, you've seen me talk about this book. This book has appeared in other videos. I continuously comment on how ratty this book is looking, but it is Tarot Plain and Simple by Anthony Lewis. My first tarot book, the first one I used. I've had this, I don't even know how long I've had this, to be fair. This is, it was printed in 2000, it's an 8th edition, and I've probably had it at least nearly that long, at least nearly 20 years at this point. And it is like broken. It's broken. The spine, I break my spines, that's part of the problem. The spine is broken, the pages are falling out, the pages have gone all like funny coloured and ratty looking, and it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess. But you can tell it's a book I've had for a really long time because I haven't highlighted or written in a single page, which is quite unusual for me with a book nowadays, but I didn't do that back then. Like, look, even the plastic is falling off. This book is a really basic, it is plain and simple. It's it takes you through, first of all, a little bit about the tarot, and like an overview and spreads and putting it all together kind of thing in the first few chapters. The main spread is a Celtic cross spread, and it gives you examples of how you would read a sample Celtic cross. And then it goes through the major arcana, the minor arcana, the courts, and then there's a little bit, the appendix is astrology and numerology. And it gives quite a lot of information as well, but it is basically keywords. That's basically what this book is a book of keywords. So you've got the title, some other different, for the majors you've got some other names that it's known by. You've got an upright main, sort of like a main headline thing, I guess. Then you've got your keywords and phrases. It's all falling apart. Oh, just cut out that sneeze. No one needs to see that. You've got situation and advice, and then people, so who the card would represent if it was talking about people. And then it does basically exactly the same for the minors, except the minors have a almost like a keyword instead of other names that it would be known by. And it also gives you a bit at the beginning of the minors section. It firstly gives you a bit about each of the suits. So you've got wands, you've got different names that the wands might be named after. You've got element, astrological signs, season, traits, occupations, keywords and phrases, and people. And then it sorts the cards into numbers rather than suits. And then you get keywords and phrases, corresponding major arcana card, situation and advice, and personal year for each of the numbers from ace to 10. So it's loads and loads of information, but it is rote information. It doesn't offer you any kind of depth or different ways of reading the cards or, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's really basic. You lay out the cards and then these are what the cards mean type book. And for a very, very long time, that was what I did. I laid out the cards, always a Celtic cross, because that's what the book told me to do. And then I interpreted it using the keywords and things from this book. And I loved it. And it was the only book I had for a really, really long time. So still very much a loved favourite, still very much poured through and stuff. I'm really tempted though. I am tempted to get another copy, but I don't know. I don't know if I will spend out on another copy, because as long as this one is still legible, I don't know if I would rather not spend that money on a different book instead. Anyway, enough about that. That's book number 1. Book number 2 is it's not the second ever book I owned on tarot, but it's the first book that I probably read. There were actually 2 books that when I started, just before I started my channel, so back at the beginning of 2018, end of 2017, beginning of 2018, when I really started to take tarot more seriously and really wanted to study it and learn it, I read a couple of books. One was Beyond the Basics by Anthony Lewis, which I didn't understand. There was a lot in that book I didn't understand, and I'm going to have to go back and reread it now I've got a bit more knowledge. And the other one was Tarot Interactions by Deborah Lipp. This is a phenomenal book. This is definitely one of my favourites. Obviously, that's why it's in my top 5. That was a incredibly... Anyway, this was the first book that really got me thinking about reading the cards as a group in a reading rather than individual cards within a position, because I'd never really done that. I'd really just drawn the cards and read that card. This position is for the future, so I've read this card in relation to the keywords for the future, but never really thought about how they all interact and how they all link together. And obviously, as the title suggests, Tarot Interactions very much is about that. So it starts off with like interacting with the cards themselves and interacting with your psyche, and it's got really good exercises. Again, I haven't really highlighted anything, but I have sticky tabbed this one. So it's got one that I really enjoyed, and I still do a lot, is speed reading, where you basically shuffle the cards and then you think about a question and you shuffle the cards and then you turn over your first card and just talk. You just start talking. You just start answering the question based on the card, and as soon as you go or whatever, you turn over the next card and you keep going until basically you feel like you've run out of things to say. Or in here she says after you've laid down 5 to 7 cards, put the deck down. And it's just a really good exercise to kind of unclog your mental filter, because you just have to keep going all the time, and I still do that and I really enjoy it. And then you have a section on how it interacts with other disciplines, which is when I really first started to think about astrology and, you know, Kabbalah, Tree of Life kind of stuff, and how I wanted to bring those kind of things, and if I wanted to bring those kind of things into my practice and what that would look like and how I would do that. And that's never gone any further than that, but that's, you know, that kind of was sparked by this book. One of my favourite bits in this book is patterns. There's a whole thing on recognising patterns and doing the math, so which appeals to me. So this is where you basically you think about statistically how likely it is that you'll get a certain number of a particular card come up based on how many cards are in your reading. So if you're doing a 6 card reading, you would expect to see 1 or 2 majors in a 6-card reading statistically. If you see more than 2 majors come up in a 6-card reading, that's statistically significant, and that's a pattern, and then it's about interpreting that pattern. If you do a 12-card reading, you would expect to get maybe no more than 2 or 3 of each suit. So if you get 4 of each of a suit, or 5 of a suit, or 6 of a suit, again, statistically significant and worth recognizing that pattern. And then she gives you some ideas of what those patterns might mean. And then if you get, normally, statistically, regardless of the size of your reading, you would expect for a 12-card reading, you would expect to only see none or one of the same number come up. So if the same number comes up 2, 3 or 4 times, again, statistically significant. The other side of that is, in a 12-card reading, you would expect to see 3 or 4 majors come up statistically. So if you only get 1 or 2 or none, that also is statistically significant and therefore worth paying attention to. So it's those kind of things, numbers, statistics, that kind of thing, that I really like. So that was a real, something that was probably one of the most valuable things I got out of this book. And then she goes on to kind of layouts and interactions, and a lot of this is to do with, I think it's this one. Oh no, maybe it's not. I can't really remember what that chapter's about without going into it in a bit more detail. So I'm going to ignore it because I can't remember. But then there's bits in here about this is the one I was thinking of. Interactions between and among the cards. And this is about looking at the cards as a whole layout, where she kind of talks about the flow of movement in a deck. So seeing the flow of movement between a reading based on where all the people are looking and which cards are looking at which other cards and that kind of thing. So it's really, really fascinating. It feels like I'm doing a review now. I can't review every book. That's ridiculous. We'll be here all night. And then she has some really fun section where she talks about interaction with language and then playing with and experimenting with the cards, and also a section on interaction with the querent. So it's all the different ways that we might interact with different things in a reading, how we interact with the cards, how we interact with the positions, how we interact with the patterns, how we interact with the person we're reading for, and how all of those things are significant within a tarot reading. And they were all things I'd never considered until I started reading this book, and it really changed the way I read massively. So yeah, there's that. I need to speed this up a bit, otherwise people are going to be switching off, bored out of their minds. So next up, we have Tarot Shadow Work, Using the Dark Symbols to Heal by Christine Jetty. This is, I believe, still out of print, but I keep hearing rumours that it's going to be reprinted. So hopefully that's true, because it's a really valuable book. And it's about using the tarot, unsurprisingly, as part of your shadow work practice. And I have worked through this book in detail. I've done everything. All of the chapters have things that they expect you to do and to work through. I've done it all. I intend to go back and do it again. And I kind of... so firstly, this book was a gift from a friend who has since passed away, so huge amount of sentimental value there. But also, I fell into tarot, it sounds like a terrible way of putting it, but I guess I kind of discovered tarot as this psychological tool, because before then I don't know if I was necessarily consciously using it that way. And shadow work, I kind of fell into both of those things at the same time without ever really, again, considering how they could interact and how I could do both at the same time. So this book was kind of the first time I really, I'd done shadow side tarot spreads and stuff, but this was the first time I'd ever really seen anything about using the tarot in a completely different way in order to do shadow work, and the value I got out of this book was just, it was astronomical, and I definitely want to go back and work through this again. I have heard Tarot, is it Tarot for the Healing Heart? I recently purchased because I've been recommended it a couple of times. I've not worked through it yet, so I'll let you know how I get on with that, but I love this book so much. I definitely will be going through it again because I think it's just so valuable. And then I discovered our lovely Benabel Wen and bought her book Holistic Tarot, which is a tome of a book. It's a big ass book, and I have read this book once all the way through from beginning to end because I have to do that with every book I buy because that's just my thing. And then I've obviously post-it noted it so I can go back and relook at things and find things easily. And I think this was the first book that I really found treated tarot more as an analytical process, reading tarot more as an analytical process and less as a completely intuitive one. And that is a way of reading that personally works very, very well with my mindset and how I like to approach things. So I really dig like the analytical style. She has a name for it, and I can't remember what she calls it because it's been a while. I think she actually calls it Tarot Analytics, and I think it might even be the name of the first. Yeah, Tarot Analytics. That's what she calls it. Deary me. And I, you know, it's less about the woo and more about the logic and the rational, and I loved that. And this book is highly recommended within the tarot community for good reason. There is a shitload of good information in here. I've recommended it to my friends who don't frequent the online tarot community but who do read tarot, who also have got a lot of value out of it. Fabulous book. I would recommend it to anybody. And you don't have to do what I did. You don't have to sit and read it from cover to cover. It is designed in such a way that you could dip in and out of the different bits that you want when you want them, and still get a lot of value out of it. And it's a reference book. It is ultimately a reference book and could be used as one. And then lastly, it would be a reasonably new one, which is Queering the Tarot by Cassandra Snow. This book isn't perfect. Don't get me wrong. None of these books are perfect. No book is perfect. Every book has its issues, and we could discuss the issues with the books, but these aren't reviews. So I'm not going to talk about the issues because I'm not reviewing them. If I was reviewing them, I would be more open about the things that I don't like and what I think are the cons of each book, because I haven't done a book review in a while actually, but if you've seen any of my other book reviews that I've done, I'm pretty honest with them. It's not all positive. I'm very upfront about the things that I do and don't like about a book, but I'm not doing that here. That's not the point. So yes, I acknowledge that the books all have their cons, as does this one. If you want to know more about some of the cons in this book and things that I didn't even consider when I read it, I do recommend checking out Katie Flower's review on this book, because she adds some insight into this book that I wouldn't have added even if I had been reviewing it. Anyway, the reason that I love this book so much is because it came out at exactly the right time for me. It came out at a time when I was asking some very potent, serious questions about myself that in the first 37 years of my life I'd never really thought about, asked, considered, acknowledged. And so it was actually quite a very difficult and stressful time initially, and this book kind of came along in that time, and it gave me a place to focus that kind of angst that I was having about things that I was thinking and discovering and you know, journaling about and that kind of stuff. And it was also, again, a book that allowed me to look at how to read the tarot in a completely different way than I normally do, that I'd ever considered before. And it isn't just a keywords book, it is it's very specific about how the tarot can be interpreted within a specific scenario, but within a specific set of parameters, I guess, is the best way to put that. And I'd never really considered that before, not just about, you know, reading it from a queer perspective, but there's, you know, reading it from I don't know, I can't think of any other examples, my mind has gone completely blank, but I'm interpreting the tarot in ways that are outside the norm of how tarot is interpreted. And this, again, really opened my eyes to different ways that you could look at the tarot. And it just came across at exactly the right moment in time for me, based on personal stuff that I was going through and personal experiences that I was having, that I haven't discussed in any detail anywhere, but I have had thoughts about making videos about that, but I'm not really sure, A, if my channel's the right place to do that, B, if I'm in a place where I'm ready to do that, and C, if it's even something that people are all that interested in. But that's beside the by, like by the by or beside the point are the normal sayings, but beside the by is what we're going with this evening because it's late and I'm a little bit tired. And I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what books you love in the comments below, and I will see you all shortly, I'm sure, for another one. Take care, everyone, and lots of love. Bye bye.